I thought making a tower defense game would be easy. I was wrong. Over the next few days, I tried building an entire tower defense game completely from scratch. And somehow, every single feature I added created an even bigger disaster. But after hours of bugs, balancing problems, and suffering, I actually finished it. At the start, I had absolutely nothing. Just the empty Godot project, and way too much confidence. To learn how tower defense games actually worked, I watched tutorials from Brackeys and Zenva, which helped for about 5 minutes before everything started breaking. First, I created the map, drew the enemy path, added the tiles, and then made my very first enemy. This tiny little slime, and honestly, it looked pretty good, until the game completely broke. The first problem was the health system, because somehow, I managed to initialize the health variable incorrectly. After fixing that, I animated the slime, and immediately noticed another problem. The enemy was under the tiles, bro got sent into the back rooms. So after fixing the scaling and z-index, the slime finally appeared correctly, except now it was rotating around the corners like a drifting car. At this point, I was already losing my sanity, so I disabled rotations before the slime started training for Formula 1. And somehow, that was only the beginning. Next, I built the enemy spawner, which sounds simple, except I attached it to the completely wrong node. After fixing that, I created a player system with health and money. Then I added a signal called Reach End, so enemies could damage the player at the end of the path. Except, it didn't work. At all. I spent way too long debugging this before realizing the problem was one number. My code checked if progress ratio was 1 or greater. The issue? The enemy never reached 1. So I changed the 1 to 0.99, and somehow, the entire game suddenly worked. Programming makes perfect sense, right? Now, it was finally time to add actual towers. I started with the wizard tower and added enemy detection using Area 2D. And after a lot of tweaking, the tower finally attacked enemies, which meant it was finally time for bullets. And this is where everything collapsed. I somehow managed to create over 40 errors because I mixed up Sprite 2D and animated Sprite 2D. I know, I suck. But eventually, the bullets started tracking correctly. And for the first time, the game actually felt real. But I accidentally created the most overpowered tower imaginable, which was the money tower. The money tower generated me gold every second, which was kinda broken at first. But after a bit of tweaking, it finally worked correctly. Next, I added a money system and a tower placement menu. Players could finally place towers around the map, which immediately caused another problem. You could place towers directly on the enemy path, meaning the enemies had to phase through buildings like ghosts. So I added custom tile data to block tower placement on path tiles. And finally, the game started feeling like an actual tower defense game. So naturally, I decided to destroy the balancing. I added more towers: lightning tower, poison tower, crossbow tower. And the crossbow tower was completely broken. This thing could survive 19 rounds by itself. Like I accidentally created a medieval machine gun. At this point, balancing no longer existed. But while trying to fix the towers, I accidentally broke the round system. Again. My round system checked when the count reaches a multiple of 20, which should have worked, except I made one tiny mistake. I increased the count when enemies died, instead when they spawned, meaning the rounds were completely random. So after another hour of debugging, I finally fixed it, and then I added bosses, which somehow caused even more bugs. At this point, the game technically worked, but the enemies were way too boring. So I started adding more enemy types. Some enemies move faster, some had more health, and some were specifically designed to make my towers suffer. Then I added the bosses, and this changed everything. The first boss was supposed to feel challenging, but instead, it immediately exposed every balancing problem in the entire game. Some towers did basically no damage, while the crossbow tower was out here deleting bosses in seconds. So now, I had to rebalance tower damage, attack speed, enemy health, boss scaling, and wave difficulty. And every time I tried to fix one thing, something else broke. So after another hour of debugging, I finally fixed it. And finally, I created the upgrade system. And somehow, upgrading one tower caused every tower in the game to display max upgrades, even though they weren't fully upgraded, which wasn't supposed to happen, obviously. At this point, I honestly wasn't even surprised anymore. Turns out, the issue wasn't even the upgrade system itself, it was the button text. I was accidentally updating the UI button globally. So after fixing that, more bugs appeared, then more bugs, then even more bugs. At one point, pressing play multiple times spawned infinite enemies, which basically turned my game into a CPU benchmark. But eventually, after days of debugging, everything finally started working together. Once the core game was finally working, I started focusing on balancing my game. At this point, I realized the balancing was completely broken. Since I added upgrades to the towers, I realized the game needed even more balancing. The towers were becoming stronger, the enemies had to keep up, and I had to make sure the game still felt challenging without becoming unfair. Some towers were way too strong, especially the crossbow tower. This thing was basically paying taxes, solving world hunger, and deleting every enemy on the map at the same time. Meanwhile, the other towers felt useless after a few rounds, so I spent a ridiculous amount of time changing the fire rates, damage, prices, upgrade costs, and basically every number in the game. Eventually, the game started feeling way more fair. And honestly, seeing all the towers, enemies, upgrades, and bosses working together after starting from literally nothing was one of the coolest things I've made. Now the game had multiple towers, bosses, upgrades, money system, wave progression, animated bullets, tower placement, and a full main menu. And somehow, it all actually worked. A few days earlier, this was literally just an empty project, and now it was a real game. Honestly, this project was way harder than I expected, but it also made me want to keep building bigger and better games. So if you want to see me continue improving this game, subscribe, because this is only the beginning.